David Sable back for Creativity from the Other Side, brought to you by New York Festival, the most important award show for creativity in the United States, the primo show, with the best juries, with the best work from all around the world, the best creative work from all around the world. And today we're here with Creativity from the Other Side, where we talk to the most interesting people in our industry and elsewhere, people who drive creativity, people who inspire us with their output. And really we're here just to learn from them and learn what inspires them, what can we learn from them to inspire us. And I'm just so thrilled to be with Lucas Bongioanni, except we'll talk about the Bongioanni because it's really not Bongioanni the way I just pronounced it, but good enough.
Close.
Who
Close
is
enough.
who is the Chief Creative Officer of GUT New York.
Thank you for having me.
No gut, no glory.
No gut,
and
no
we're
glory.
going to talk about that in a minute.
No gut, no glory.
So you're not Italian, you're actually from Argentina.
Yes.
So my Bongioanni was like a little, threw everybody off. Sorry guys, didn't mean to do that. Argentina, Buenos Aires, Argentina for sure, but Buenos Aires, in my view, one of the most creative cities in the world.
100%.
In fact, I would argue, having worked with my own agencies there for many years, literally to this day, some of the best work and the most creative people I've ever met came from. Why is that?
But there's a mix of things. There's this sentiment that like you're far away in the map and you're looking for that recognition that pushes you.
Interesting.
To be like, if I want to be at the center of things, if I want to have something that people talk around in the world, you really need to push that, right? And there's also like the fact that like, once you start in Argentina and you, let's say in advertising specifically, you try to make things in ways that like go beyond a budget, go beyond ambition of the client or of a project. And you kind of like have to find your way through things all the time. There are obstacles that creativity can put down or like can help you overcome. Where in other places in the world, you know, if creativity is not always the solution to that problem, there's other problems and other solutions. But in Argentina, you feel like if I am creative enough around this problem, I can get there. And I think that pushes us all.
Interesting. And you've worked, and like I always thought that I had the best agencies there, but the truth is arguably
there are too many. There are too
arguably
many.
good, but that's the point, right? There's so many good agencies there, and you work for some of the best. I mean, Draft, FCB, BA, Del Campo. I mean, is one of the greatest.
One of the greatest, with a lot of amazing people in there. But at the time,
who have gone elsewhere. It's also interesting. I think there are probably, as I think about it, more people that I've seen over my career have come from Buenos Aires to agencies around the world than just about from any other city and or country in Latin America.
Yeah.
Is that true? Would you agree?
I would think so. I mean, you know, from Brazil, a lot of amazing talent.
Brazil too, but Brazil's not Latin America. It's
it's
a different country.
You're right. I think about like South, then I go South. But yeah, I think there's a bit of pride that comes with the Argentinian mindset also.
Right,
that,
very
like,
much
that,
so.
That pushes you to be like, well, I need to stand out. I need to be the best or try to go for the best. That also comes with the Argentinian like pride. But it's interesting because like from a very, and I don't know how it happened, but like from a very, maybe like 50 or 60 years ago, the quality in advertising in Argentina was always like really high, really, really high. And it reached
the craft was always very good.
The craft, the concept, the way of like thinking about strategy and media placement, everything was like really, really high. And once you get to like a point where like it happened to me, where like I grew up in the 90s in Argentina, which was kind of like, maybe because I lived through it, but like it was kind of like the pinnacle of the advertising in Argentina with Agusha and Bachetti and Ponce and Y&R and all of these amazing shops that are kind of like thriving at the moment. it really felt like we were talking about advertising the way we're talking about shows now. The way that I can say, like, have you watched whatever Yellow Jackets? We were talking about advertising. Have you seen the one with the car and the thing? And that was every day we would talk about advertising.
Absolutely. One of the reasons I used to love to come down there, because that's always what I found when we would get together with people from other agencies. It was always interesting like that. So you come out of there, you've basically won everything there is to win in this industry. Like every show, every magazine award, every list that you're on, you've won. You've worked for just some of the best agencies from BBH onwards, and now you're at GUT. Tell us about GUT, because I don't think enough people know about GUT and know about no gut, no glory.
No gut, no glory.
Tell us about GUT. Tell us what drives GUT, what drove you there, and what's the special ethos?
I think no gut, no glory defines it pretty well. And I think the number one thing that GUT does really well is the branding. And the number one thing that attracted me to GUT was like, whenever we ask clients to be brave, whenever we ask clients to have a single-minded idea, something to stand behind, an ethos, like you said, and then like you look at some agencies and they don't even have that. So when you look at GUT and you look at the conviction and almost like the power of focusing on one single thing for your brand, I love that. And the more I got into understand GUT and like started to work at GUT, like for the last, I think it's like 2.5 months, really, not too much. It is exactly like that. It's exactly what you think from the outside, it's on the inside, which to me is like paired it perfectly, because in my mind, like I could see a strong brand from the outside. If you get inside and it doesn't behave like that, that could be like a soul crusher, but it's not like that at all.
So what's interesting, so no gut, no glory, the name, okay, we get that, like a little promotional. What I found interesting, that there were 3 pieces to the philosophy. There's courage, transparency, and intuition, which I guess is GUT.
GUT.
So talk a little bit about those 3 things. You told us a little bit about courage. Like the clients have to have the courage to, but my view of that is the clients have courage if they believe in the agency. The courage doesn't just come because they're out there on their own and they think, and it's not like, because we've all been there, right? We've all been there when an agency brings a bad idea to a client, but then the agency, no, this is it. And then it gets produced and it's a failure or whatever, and then the agency is like, well, you told us to do it.
You blame it on them, they blame it on you.
So you've got, I just found I just loved it. I loved the courage, transparency, like courage, have transparency, and then intuition, use your gut. Just talk a little about those 3 things.
Well, yeah, so courage, we talked about that kind of like at the beginning, like kind of like, I think it was my first meeting. And defining courage to me was not, because you usually attribute courage to like the creative. It's like the creative needs to be courageous. Of course, the client needs to be courageous. But I think the thing I noticed too when I started at GUT was that everyone is courageous. It's not creativity or the creative department trying to push the boundaries and everyone trying to stop it. Everyone needs to be on the same kind of like mental space. And I think as I started working with all these people, and even like we work closely with Miami and LA, across the departments, there is that courage at the core. That everybody is saying like, what if we do this? What if we add this? What if there's no real questioning on why we're doing this. Of course, like we've gone through strategy, we've gone through like the process, but there is like courage to go for it and then like make a decision and like, of course, do an educated decision on things.
And you talked, just to go back 1 second, because I'm not sure that people know enough about GUT. So you've got New York, Miami, LA, Netherlands.
Amsterdam, Madrid, Singapore, Buenos Aires, Mexico, Sao Paulo.
So truly global.
Truly global, yeah. 3 new offices this year.
Amazing.
Amazing.
Big clients,
Very big
serious
clients.
clients, very big clients.
Yeah.
Serious
very big
brands. Like it's not like GUT working with small little businesses. This is like major clients. And we'll talk about some of the work in a minute.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that leads us to transparency. Which also I was like pleasantly surprised about transparency, where we talk about these things that they really get down to being open discussions about it's either budget or money or, hiring moments or, client and expectations. And like, I think it makes everything feel more like an everyday basis instead of like all these pressure and like tension that like when you feel like something is not being said, but you feel and it like kind of like creates that tension. So that's the number, not talking about transparency, that I also feel
Actually,
like.
and the transparency is internal between you and your own agency and between you and the client.
And with, yeah, exactly.
So it's both.
And it becomes like when you see that it's like it's a two-way street. When you are transparent to the client can be transparent with you.
Right.
If we're all like hiding stuff from each other, it creates that kind of like, invisible tension then later it comes back in the shape of whatever, angry email or whatever it is.
And the third, intuition.
And the third, intuition. I think it's hard for intuition, especially nowadays, where everything is data and everything is, clear like likes or engagement of hard numbers. And intuition is something that like we're starting to lose because you follow the numbers. So I think intuition, I can see it in the work, I can see it with everybody. And I think it's the thing that we need to keep fostering because it's something that like kind of like goes away too fast in advertising, I feel like. It feels like someone says something in a meeting and people just lose it and they follow, they follow the trend because somebody had an objection to an idea. And you start hearing like, if the numbers or the data is not with you, you start to feel like that intuition kind of like vanish. And I can see it even on people's faces as we talk. So if there is something there, it's worth it to pursue.
So how do you not lose that? How do you not lose that in your own teams and then between you and the client? Because we've all seen that moment, right? It's like your gut, if you will, is your intuition is telling you what to do. Like you have this insight, you get it, but to your point, the data, which is just a snapshot of something, might be able to be read a different way, and somebody takes it that way, and then all of a sudden, the client, you, people in the room are like, how do you preserve that?
Well, I think like there's two ways, and they're not, it's not either or. But I think if you really believe in it, you have to find a way to prove it. If the testing didn't go well, try testing it again. Test it differently. Test it with the people that you think that maybe are, more important for that testing. Maybe you think that like the testing wasn't fair or the piece that you were testing wasn't great. Let's say, I'm not talking about testing but I think there's something that you can do. Prove it out. If you really believe in it, I think you can prove it out. And the second thing is connection with the client. You need to have that connection where it's like you can feel that the other person is trusting you on this. Because at the end of the day, when you talk about ideas, when you talk about these type of projects that are like, that could be like huge for a client or a brand, they usually have some sort of perceivable problem, right? Like, but there's a little bit of like, what would happen if this doesn't go well? There's always that. If everything feels too safe, it's probably not perfect.
Right, which we kind of know, right?
We kind of know.
So just going to stop you for a minute. So masterclass moment with Lucas. Like think about those three things, right? Hugely important. Courage, transparency, intuition. And listen to what he said. None of them, not one of the three, belongs just to the agency, or even more importantly, just to the creative. Belongs to everybody. And I think what you said, which really struck me, is that it brings trust. Like if you can get these three things, if you can get the first two right, the courage and the transparency, when you come with your intuition, you've already built trust from the top. And so your ability maybe to get the intuition, get that intuitive moment going, has probably increased.
Yeah. I think about trust like all the time. I think it's influential to everything we do, from the moment we get out of bed to the moment we go to sleep. Everything that happens is trusting people in one way or another, and we take it for granted. I think a little bit how much trust we put in other people, and I mean from you know an organization, teammates, colleagues, to the guy that drives the Uber to where you're going, the guy that drives the plane to where you're going. Every piece of that kind of like range of trust goes back to every decision we make. So I think they all kind of like, all three pieces connect back to trust.
So trust is, I totally agree with you. And I think we live in a world where trust is eroding. Trust in institutions is eroding. Trust in news is like kind of almost gone. Trust in politicians sort of doesn't exist anymore. And the truth is, we've always been in a business where trust occasionally has been an issue. I mean, we know this, right? And partially sometimes because we don't take accountability, or maybe because the client doesn't take accountability, usually around accountability. And to me, accountability is all about trust. So it's important. So you're right. I think just again, lesson, trust. Trust is the core of everything that we do in our business. Great creativity comes because you trust yourself, you trust your team trusts you, client trusts you. Client trusts the agency trusts the client. Like that's, like you got to build that complete circle of trust to make it work. So what did you bring to, so you've had this incredible career, you've won everything there is to win, you came from one of the most creative places in the world, worked at some of the best agencies in the world, come to GUT, you've been there not that long, but you and I loved how you said you spent time talking to them about what did they mean by courage, what did they mean by transparency, what did they mean, what do you think you bring to them? What lesson have you learned that's in your storied career that is that not different, but adds value to it that we all can learn from?
It's a good question.
That's what I get paid for. So.
That's what you get paid for. It. You know what? I try not to think about that too much. I try to go and act, because I think like what every person brings to a particular space is the eclectic knowledge that you gather. And like you become this person that is like unique just by the context and who you surround yourself with. And when I look back at my career and how it went about like growing up in advertising, and the people I got to learn from, and the people that like, shaped me in a way, right? Like you have your heroes or like who you like in advertising and outside of advertising. But within my career, I was lucky to have really good bosses, if you want, or mentors. And I kind of like, as I was growing up, I felt like I was grabbing pieces from all of them. So I bring this kind of like curated version of advertising that goes from Argentina to New York, and that is kind of unique, that you cannot just have by, trying to put it together by yourself.
So mentoring is important for you.
100%. 100%. To the people, like whenever I talk to kids that are getting into the industry or like interns, I usually tell them to focus their efforts to try and get into a place that the person that's leading it means a lot to you. Because you're gonna have, or you're gonna try and grab all of the traits that they have, and your first traits are gonna be taken from those people. So I think it's incredibly important that you grab it from the people that you look up to or the people that inspire you.
So I'm going to take a moment and do another masterclass moment here. So I would strongly argue that what you just heard, and those who follow some of my writing know that I write about this all the time, one of the key tenets of leadership is humility. And how many times have we seen creative directors who come into agencies and say, well, I'm going to bring them what I know, and like, okay, great, and you heard exactly the opposite. And I love that. I like your humility just like so inspired me truthfully, because you know, you had a moment to say whatever you wanted to say. And I think that, and by the way, I don't share questions, so none of this is prepared. Like,
True.
I think that notion of coming in to listen, but bringing who you are to the table is the critical piece.
Yeah. And I look at
the
every
luck
place.
to have somebody who has this experience and bringing a piece, like I love that, bringing a piece of all these other people in. Like, what an opportunity.
What an opportunity. And I love that I look at people and I look at like that you can kind of like see their path and want to learn from that path and want to take knowledge from that path. At the end of the day, you're going to end up learning and being inspired by these people that surround you. So you have to look at it that way.
All right, so let's talk about some work, like specific work. And I just picked a couple just because they spoke to me. So the first one, I'm going to tell you honest, hand to heart, Super Bowl spot. It was, if not my single favorite spot that year, it definitely was amongst them. And I remember when it came on, I was like screaming for everybody to come into the room to watch it. And, you know, I'm one of these people who I tend to, during the Super Bowl, scream at the bad work. It's, oh my God, you're embarrassing this, you're embarrassing the industry, get that off, that shit, it's terrible. But when there's something great, and I had no idea that you had anything to do with it, I just was watching this piece and I thought, it is so awesome and so of the moment and so right for the Super Bowl and so right for the client and such a great use of talent and idea. And obviously I'm talking about EV on screen.
General Motors is going electric, and Netflix is joining in by including more EVs in their movies and shows. It's the least they can do.
So if you're gonna get swarmed by an army of the dead, why not get swarmed in an EV?
No! I said no biting.
Or if you're being voluntarily kidnapped, why not be kidnapped in an EV? What's that scent? Is it pine?
Now, should they add EVs everywhere? They shalln't. They shan't. Is it shallant or shan't?
It's neither.
What about here, Erica?
You're ruining the show, you idiot.
What do you mean? It's me, Dusty.
You're not.
Yeah, you're right. This is ridiculous.
Tammy, wait!
Later, loser.
But anywhere else, it makes sense.
There goes another runner.
Brad was so much better for you. You should have gone with Brad.
Yeah, Brad.
Are you serious?
Why not make more of those cars electric? It's the least they can do. Gordon, you kill me. I mean, you literally did kill me. You know what? I'm glad you bit me too.
Tell us, like, how did that come together? What did you think before? What was the outcome afterwards, other than, like, everybody talked about it, and no doubt you won lots of awards, more for the client point of view? Like, just give us a sense.
Well, I mean, it started, like, I think a year and a half before that Super Bowl.
Wow.
A year and a half before that Super Bowl.
So it wasn't like November. Oh my God!
Oh, we got to do something.
Lucas, we just bought, like, we got some remnant. We got like the last spot. Like,
not at all. Not at all. They've definitely
We've all
not
had that one.
We've had that one, but not at all. I mean, it was a long process that I think it benefited us a lot, because the whole premise of putting this platform together was not easy to explain. So from the get-go, we knew that we had to simplify the message as much as we can. Have a concept, have an idea, but the message needed to get across really simply. So,
and the message was?
The message was that Netflix and General Motors were going to do a partnership to put more EVs in the back of the shows. And that wasn't like not all the shows. It was not only General Motors, because General Motors was going to open it up to other car manufacturers too. So it was the start of a movement that opened it up to everybody. So it had like a lot of asterisks. And I think we I send the clients this photo of the line that I call the line. I made a collage of like just talking about the line because we talked about that line that you have at the beginning of the spot that explained the most succinctly in the most colloquial way. We wrote that for a year. If you look at the catalog of Netflix, it's like you have like your action, your romantic comedies, your period pieces, your
Zombies.
So it's like zombies. So if you're gonna get swarmed by a zombie, get swarming an EV. Why not? You know, it doesn't do you any harm. But then we started playing with like the different ways that you can attack every show and like, but if you do it on Bridgerton, that kind of like we can't do it on Bridgerton. So we went in a way that like we could have some of them to guarantee people. It's like, we're not gonna fuck with your shows. I don't know if you have to beep that.
No, we're allowed to say fuck.
Good, fuck. So we're not gonna beep
okay,
that.
fuck. Go ahead.
We're not gonna mess with your shows, but we are gonna have them in the back. And that was a huge nuance because it wasn't like, oh, we're gonna put them up in front. No, they're gonna be in the background. You're not gonna really notice them. So that whole piece was like, okay, so how do we attack this in a way that feels, relevant and entertaining?
It was. And so what about Will Ferrell? How did that? Because he was so perfect. Like I can't imagine anybody better, honestly.
No, we wrote it thinking about that Will Ferrell was part of other GM commercials in the past for the Super Bowl, and that there was a possibility. And that particular creative that we brought, that was one of many others, was written specifically for him. And the whole process of getting him took several months. And he was in, he was out, he was in, he was out. It was somebody else, it was all sorts of people, and finally landed back on him. And it was like, it's like bucket list.
Yeah, it's amazing. And so what do you think the outcome of it was?
The outcome was, to me, everything that we hoped for. Every piece of feedback that we've gotten out of that piece is exactly what we wanted to hear. The second that they announced the platform, we heard the GM stock value went up 6%. Off of that, we came up with a campaign, and we started being people reacting to it, of course, like with positive feedback. But at the same time, whenever there was negative feedback for like, I don't know, someone didn't like a joke, people were coming in and like defending. And this is like, to me, that was like always
the best.
The best.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so let's go to another piece of work. You played off something that had become, I guess, almost a meme, how to become a Bridgerton. But the twist was with Tanqueray.
With Tea of Tanqueray.
Yeah, and so my favorite is the Tea of Tanqueray is when, one of the Jonas Brothers says, what was it? Oh, I brought my own tea. And he pulls up the Tanqueray. Like, yes, that's it, exactly.
That's the tea time we want.
The famously British gin crashed this British party to make it happen.
Welcome to How to Tea Time Like a Bridgerton. I'm Joseph Jonas I. I know what you might be thinking. I'm a Jonas, not a Bridgerton. Well, that might be true. The internet has been kind enough to point out that I do look like one.
That was a great call at the end of a very long process where we got to this huge project and this huge campaign. And because of several reasons, some of the executions were starting to fall off a cliff. This died, and this died, and this died, and this died. And I remember it was somewhere like December 20th, where the team came up with the ideas like, what if we just reframe it and make it all about, because people are talking about how the Jonas brothers look like the Richardson brothers. What if we make it all about teaching the Jonas how to be a Bridgerton? And that was a saving grace moment from the team. And we said like, yes, we gotta try and do that. And, in hindsight, we got lucky because Joe Jonas was part of the promoting Tanqueray. He was already a spokesperson for them. So everything kind of come together in one meeting, and we went ahead and shot it, and everything, just every piece just kind of like started falling into place. Which is, it's kind of like what's happening with advertising nowadays, really, is that brands are really, really listening to what the audiences say. I don't think it happens that much before. I think right now, brands are looking at people, are looking at culture, and taking bits of culture to give people what they want, but in a different way. And I think our job is, of course, advertisers, but also entertainers, is give people what they're looking for, but in unexpected ways.
Right. But I think to your point, you've got to listen. So the confluence of the brothers looking like the Bridgerton brothers and that being discussed, the T and Tanqueray and their connection, like all that comes together. And the truth is, not every agency would do that, because some agencies, well, it's too expected. And they would try to shoehorn something into it, as opposed to saying, no, that's brilliant. It's the brilliance of it. Is it okay? It's culture. Like, how do we now not shoehorn? How do we leverage?
How do we leverage? I think that's one of the hardest things to do for a creative, I think. Because you come up with an idea, and maybe the idea doesn't really belong, but you try to push it in no matter what, and you can feel it. You can feel that the idea doesn't really belong, and you're trying to push it. And I think when you come up with an idea that really belongs into that world, and you start like really foster that idea and let it grow, the ideas.
Well, that's when clients trust you. In the previous example, they don't. When you try to shoehorn it in, that's when they tend to go the other way, and it's a shame. But as we know,
it is a shame.
Very true. It does happen. So the third piece I want to talk about is Oreos. Now,
amazing.
There's 100 agencies that have Oreos work. Everybody has done something for Oreos, from the famous dunk at the Super Bowl to all kinds of work. I just kind of like the Thins Protection Program.
Oreo has disguised themselves in kid-repellent packaging.
We'll be hiding them from your children.
Yeah.
It's part of the Oreo Thins Protection Program.
I thought, again, to your point, simple insight. Simple, like the simplicity of the insight is just so good and clear that you just look at it and you go, yeah. It's like, yeah, I got it.
Yeah. I think the insight is always the best way to get people to trust the idea. Because if you can relate to the beginning of the idea, then you can accept everything that comes after, right? If you feel like this is completely foreign to you, it's going to be hard to trust that this is going to work. So finding, when the team found that insight and started building that campaign, it all felt very natural. It felt like a step after another, just taking steps, right? So got into all the way to this execution of hiding the Oreos from your kids. So if you just go and you just, you might tell a client that's like, well, we need to hide your products from your number one consumer. They're probably gonna say no. But if you tell a story on how you get there, you're probably gonna get it right.
We've talked about some of your best, most iconic work. And as I said, I really did love it. I had no idea that you had anything to do with it, and I love these pieces. That's why I chose them. Whether it was EV or whether it was Oreos or whether it was the T for Bridgerton, all amazing. But there's one piece of work that I saw that I think is like your opus. It's like the best. It's called 11 a.m. for a 3-year-old. Tell us a little bit about that.
That was a magic piece. I think that's one of the persons with my wife that most inspires me. And she's always, which is my daughter, and she's always doing all crazy creative stuff that kind of like blows my mind. And in this piece, she was having some sort of rave in her bedroom that she kind of like put together to Shakira at 11 a.m. And just, I actually found it the way I see it on my Instagram, the way you see it on the video. I followed her into her bedroom and everything was shut. She was 3 years old and she was dancing with lights going around the room, which kind of scared me, but inspired me too. I appreciate that you like that one.
Well, no, because it inspired me too. I understood, like as a dad and now a grandfather, I understood like what you were going for. And what I think just makes me feel even better is the way you say it inspired you and your wife and your kid. Like, because I think that's it, right? Like, if we can't take inspiration from the people we love and the people we're closest from, then I'm not sure where we actually get it. And I think it plays into what you said before about taking little pieces of inspiration from all the people who mentored you and all the people you've met. And that's what you bring to the table. And I think that when we take all those pieces and bring them to the table, it just changes everybody else, because now we've become more transparent ourselves about who we are. And I think that helps the process. So just one last question on creativity. A lot has been written about, and we have people, surprisingly, in the industry who still talk about the need for work to be faster, cheaper. And yet you talked about 1.5 years to get to EV. And I always say, we're in the golden age of production. I dreamt about this. Where we are today is what I fantasized about. And as we know, there's green screen and blue screen and the CGI and whatever, but freaking, Mission Impossible, Tom Cruise actually takes that bicycle, that motorcycle, and goes off the freaking cliff, right? We know that rather than everybody doing stuff on sound stages and everything being CGI, even shows that have tremendous CGI, like Game of Thrones or whatever, huge amounts are done actually in person, in places. They actually go on location and do stuff. And so if I was an advertiser, and I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but if I was an advertiser and all I was thinking about was faster, cheaper, and I was putting my work up against my advertising, because we're going back to that place where advertising, just like it was, when I was a kid, is part of the show. It's in the interstitial. There it is. There's advertising. There's a break, and there's advertising.
Yeah.
Do I want my brand to look like shit because I made it faster, cheaper, when the show itself is made slower, better, and probably the most expensive ever in the history of production? So I'm curious, your view on.
It really depends on who you want to be and who you want to compete with. We're in the era of faster and cheaper. We're in the era of you have to beat the 1 second scroll. And if you go so fast and so cheap that you want to compete with the people that are doing all that content, you end up competing with content creators on TikTok. And content creator is not an influencer. Anybody that uploads, me uploading a video of my daughter.
Which was great.
Which was great. Really hard to beat. But when you get to that effort, it's you need to ask yourself, can I really beat the content creator right now that they just grab an existing film, they put NASA in front of themselves, and that's supposed to be a NASA official or whatever it is. Can I beat that person? Can I beat how fast and how cheap they do it? Or is it for me to do something else that they cannot do? I think that's that gets lost in translation a little bit more. It's we need to be faster and cheaper. Why? Why do you need to be as fast and as cheap as these people or these brands or these, influencers or content creators? Is there a place for you where the craft or the time that you have to think or the production budget that you have makes you stand out instead of trying to blend in. Because I think that the faster, cheaper kind of like movement that's been taking over advertising just blends everything in.
It just makes you ubiquitous. Changes that you don't get EV by starting with faster, cheaper. Obviously, we have tech, we have things that help us get there when we actually get into production, maybe faster than we once did, cheaper, not so clear, because the people who are actually doing big productions are definitely not, tech's not helping them get cheaper. So I just think you're right. If you want to stand out, if you want to blend, it's about what you're doing, it's about thinking about the idea, it's about thinking about the production. Amazing. So look, Lucas, I have my own tea. Not quite like the Jonas Brothers. So sorry about that, guys. But this is my tea, and it's a thank you for coming on with me. And what this tea says, besides creativity from the other side and the beautiful logo, which is obviously gives my age away because it's a kind of CBGB ripoff, which I love. Thank you, Scott.
Yes.
It's really awesome. But you are now an FOD, a friend of David. And that's like the best thing that happens to me in my ability to interview incredibly interesting people like you is that we become friends, and I feel like the time that we spent, I've learned a lot about you. I've learned a lot about creativity. I've gained some new insight, and just folks, just to go back, like another incredible masterclass about humility and the importance of humility, about where do you get inspiration from everybody you've met, from your family, from people you love, from people you meet, and how do you bring that to the table? I love the gut ethos, because I think that not just no gut, no glory, which is a great line, it's sort of, yeah, of course. That's like, why would I call my company Gut if I didn't say no gut, no glory? But I think the notion of having courage, transparency, and intuition. So building trust and then taking your intuition and understanding that it's not just you. It's not just the creative person who has to have it. It's not just the agency person. It's everybody in the agency. It's everybody at the client. It's all of you together. Have to have it and build the trust. So Lucas, I thank you again for being part of my life, for being part of the show today. Truly amazing. I've learned a lot. So thank you. And you're going to be in the executive jury, the most important jury that we have at New York festivals. It's really huge, and we look forward to hearing amazing things. And once again, David Sable, over and out. Thank you so much for joining us. Creativity from the other side. Keep watching.